Mike, he, him, and Maine.
Mike.
Mike,
Welcome.
what's going on? What's your
Hello.
topic?
Hi.
So it's addressing the main argument I've heard against abortion from many different atheists, including yourself tonight.
All right.
And it's the argument of you don't have a right to anyone else's body.
Sure.
And so my main argument against that is as soon as a child is born, the parents or guardians are obligated to take care of it. And if they don't, they go to jail. So legally, your position is just not true. That's what and you require the body to take care of something. So
semantics.
That's my argument.
So your argument is semantics, because you actually aren't legally, like, if you agree to take on care of the child, then you are obligated to. But you do not have to agree to take on care of the child. You can put that child up for adoption, for example, right? So you are no longer required. So this is about a contractual understanding, essentially, from a legal perspective. It's not about bodily autonomy. It's about an agreement. No, I'm not. Let me address, please, before we go on. So you're saying, so once a child is born, if the mother and father or whomever decides to keep it, then they have an obligation because they have chosen to take on that obligation. They have saying, okay, I understand that I have this child and I am going to keep this child. And that means that I take on the onus of responsibility to care for this child. But that is not an obligation, because they could say, you know what? I don't think that I'm capable of doing this. And they could say, here you go, state, you have the child. I can't take on this obligation, which actually negates your argument, because you're just saying that you're saying for your argument to hold true, that person would have to, as a mandate, take on the obligation of caring for that child. And they don't. Just once they contractually agree to it, then they need to fulfill the obligations of that social contract. That's it.
No, I disagree because is why, because the obligation doesn't go away. It just gets passed from the parents to whoever becomes the new guardians. So
that's still, right. And whoever takes on that contract, they have the obligation.
Yeah, if they neglect, they will. So legally, if they neglect it, then they'll be punished, and the child has a right to be taken care of until it's 18, according to the law, by
they agreed to that obligation.
Guardian. So
because they agreed to that obligation, right? They agreed to it, right?
Yes.
They agreed to the obligation. Can you force someone to agree to that obligation?
I don't know if someone can get rejected from putting the kid up to.
Yeah, you can't force someone to take on that obligation, right? So.
Well, let's say nobody volunteers to say, we'll take your kid into foster care or adopt you, then they are still responsible. It's not one.
So in a hypothetical world where there's no one else able to take care of your child. So you're saying in a hypothetical world where there's nobody else capable to take care of the child, where these systems don't exist, you have an obligation to take care of that child?
I'm saying that whoever ends up taking care of it, they are bound to use their bodies to take care of the child, whoever it ends up with. That's
not the same, though.
It's not the same. They're not bound to use their bodies.
The same because
no, they're not.
Okay, no, Mike, stop. Using your body in the sense of I have to carry this child and feed them is not the same as I have to be a physical incubator for this organism. Those things are extremely different.
I mean, if you want to, from the way I've heard the argument presented, nobody's ever, made that differentiation. Obviously nobody else can be the incubator, although that's not true with in vitro and stuff. But the point is that I've heard the term use your body. So, maybe if you want to change it to be an incubator, then that's a different question. But
it's not. So it's all about autonomy, though. No, it's about autonomy, which is, I think, the point that you're not getting. You're saying that there is an obligation, and I'm saying no, there actually isn't an obligation to utilize your body to take care of a child. You can relinquish the rights to that child at any point in time, and it is no longer your obligation.
Yeah, but it's not yours, but it's someone's. It still exists.
No, but it's not yours.
That doesn't really.
It's nobody's individual obligation, right?
It's whoever would run.
Luckily, we live in a society that has an infrastructure that takes on children from people who have relinquished that obligation. But there isn't anybody going up to to parents who have given up their children for adoption and saying to them, nah, you can't do this. You have an obligation. You absolutely have to be. You have to be the one to take care of this child. You can relate. You can say, and in that instance, no, I'm not done speaking yet. Please, one moment, please, Mike. In that instance, you can say, you know what? And we'll even play into your argument. I don't want to use the resources of my body to take care of this child, even external of me. You can say, I don't want to do that. And then you don't have to. You could maybe say, well, I don't like that. That makes me feel icky because I feel like someone should have to take care of this child. And all of us have that sort of inclination. Well, most of us, I would like to think, have that inclination, which is why these infrastructures exist. But the fact of the matter is that there is no obligation for anybody to take care of a child until they agree to that social contract. Until they say, I agree that I will take on this child and I will have the burden of care. That is something that I agree to contractually. And then once you have custody of that child, then you have an obligation legally to take care of that child. And I would argue more morally, but not up until that point. Most people that do that are parents that actually gave birth to the child, but not all. And the parents don't have to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think the point that needs to be made is that the infrastructure is still made up of people. It's not some nebulous thing.
Yeah.
And so the burden is getting passed to someone. If someone will land with that, it's not going to end up in the gutter.
Yes.
So
and know who's going to land with that burden? Someone who's consenting to take on that burden.
Ding, ding.
Yeah. But the thing is, if they ever, so what you pointed out is one option. Yes, you can pass the burden to someone. But you can't just say, I acknowledge you have the burden and then just totally forget about it, because then you are held responsible. So, I mean,
once you're consent to taking that on, yes, for sure. Absolutely. Once you consent to that social contract. Yeah, sure. Then you'd be negligent because you agreed to do something and then you didn't do it.
Yeah, but the point is, even if so basically you're saying, if you can basically just kick the can down the road, I guess.
No, I'm saying that no one can force me to do anything with my body. That's what I'm saying. No one can force me or you or Arden or anybody else to do anything with our body. Like, nobody can use a part of my body to sustain anyone's life. No one can. 0 people can do that.
Yeah, that's
what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's not true.
And you're saying, yeah, well, because if you have a kid, then you have to walk across the room to give it milk. So that you have to use your body to do that. And that's just an argument that's just semantics, because we exist corporally. So we have bodies. So anything that we agree to do, we're going to do with our bodies once we agree to do it. But you can't use my body to sustain anybody's life. You can't force me to use my body to sustain anybody's life. And if you want to extend that to once I have a child, I have to use my body to be able to, hand it things and change its diapers, then I'm still saying, no, actually don't. When I had my son, if I didn't feel like that was something I could do, I would have given him up for adoption. You still don't have the right to use my body in that circumstance. But you're saying, yeah, well, somebody else will have to. Yeah, because they consented to do it.
Okay,
and we may not like
up until the point,
true.
Even if you decide you don't want to, up until the point that child gets adopted, you're responsible. Even though you don't want to be responsible, you are responsible. So
no, you're not. You give the child to the state immediately at birth.
If you're abdicating responsibility, I imagine most developed countries would have a system where that child would become the responsibility of the state.
Right.
But the state is made of people. I mean, it's not just a random...
And they have systems where they have consented to have an open basket. So when parents say, I can't handle this responsibility, there is a place for those children to go.
Right.
Okay, I guess if you kick the can... I mean, something else you said about I can't...
You don't have to like it, but it's still true. It's still true.
No, I'm addressing something else you said about you can't force some... I'm pretty sure that people are forced from harming themselves in certain situations. So I don't think that's true, that if you want to...
Forced from harming themselves? Are you saying that people can't self-harm?
Obviously they can. I'm saying people, their autonomy is taken away. They get put in an institution, whatever. So that is another instance. I mean, I know that's not the initial topic, but that is another instance
That's a
brought up by
completely
what you
separate
said
issue.
about
So
where
you're just talking about
there-
bodily autonomy now, and that there's instances where people, in order to protect society from them or protect them from themselves, may be restrained. Is that, if that's what you're talking
Yeah.
about, then so you're saying that
Yeah, you brought up the
that's
bodily
evidence
autonomy.
that bodily autonomy is conditional. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That's evidence that bodily autonomy is conditional because people can prevent you from harming yourself. Well, we
Yeah,
could
I
have a
mean,
debate about
obviously,
whether or
yeah.
not that is a moral imperative, though. Like, should somebody have the autonomy to be able to take their own life should they choose? That's a different debate,
That's
and I
the
don't know
thing,
where I would
right?
land on that because I
Yeah,
think
I
maybe they
know.
should.
Yeah, well, I agree. It's different. I'm just obviously talking about legally that because, you can also say that you think even if the parent does have the kid, they should be able to just leave it in a gutter. So, I mean,
That is literally not what I
that's an
said.
issue.
Once you agree to that
No, I'm not-
contract, you have consented to
I'm not
having that
saying-
obligation, and you would now have that obligation. You have taken that obligation on. So if you take a kid and launch it from a cannon at that point, you can't do that. If you leave it out on the side of the road, you can't do that because that's not you fulfilling the obligation. But what I am saying is that you can opt out of that obligation.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying you're saying that. I'm just saying that is, we kind of started from that premise because I was approaching it legally initially, not because obviously someone could say, well, who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter. So
Well, I think it's just semantics anyway, because
just-
it's a completely different type of argument. I'm saying you can't use my body to sustain life, like actually use my body to sustain somebody else's life. You can't take a component of me.
You're definitely just.
Okay. You can't take a component of my body and utilize my organs. Let's say, let's bring it down just to organs. Even you can't use my body's resource and my organs to sustain somebody else's life. If you need a kidney, you can't make me give it to you. If you need blood, you can't make me give it to you. If you need a piece of my liver, you can't make me give it to you. If you need my uterus, you can't make me give it to you. Right? So you would agree, I think, in all of those circumstances, like you would agree with blood, you would agree with liver, you would agree with kidney, and then you stop at uterus and say, you do have to do that. And the reason that you should have to do that is because body autonomy has kind of this fluid way of looking at it anyway, because in other circumstances, you may have to use your body or not be allowed to use your body in certain ways. Therefore, your entire argument is mute, except for I agree with and only this one is the one that I would refute. So unless you're saying I should be obligated to give a piece of my liver, or I should be obligated to donate a kidney, and I should always be obligated to give blood, then in which case it seems to me that you're just special pleading in order to argue with this one. Just the uterus is the special exception for you.
That's not what I'm saying. I mean,
Kind
your organs make up the whole. Your organs make up the whole you. So your organs are definitely contributing to sustaining life even after the child is born. So I mean, just
but you're back. You're not actually answering the question. I'm saying, should I be obligated to give a piece of my liver to somebody if they need it?
No, and when you have a child, you don't.
Why should I be obligated to give my uterus to somebody if they need it?
No, and you don't give the uterus to the child. So your analogy.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do actually.
It's there, but it's there.
There? Okay.
Oh my God, Mike, come on.
How do you have a child without your uterus?
That's so fucking dishonest, dude. Just stop. Like either.
No, it's not. Okay. You're talking about like taking an.
The uterus is just there. It's
Mike, I'll give you a swing. Why do you think that we think it's different? Can you articulate why we think it's different?
The organ.
No, why it's different when a fetus is in a womb and using that womb requires that womb to stay alive. Why that's different than the bodily autonomy that's sacrificed in the terms of like I carry my newborn child around. Why are those two things different? Can you imagine? Because sure, you could articulate this in a way where the womb is just there. The fetus didn't mean to. The fetus just showed up and the womb was there. It's not its fault that it relies on that. But I think you know why we think that's different, because that impacts the woman's body, right? That's going to change her body forever. She's going to have to go through a likely painful process to bring that child out of her womb into the physical world. Like, these things are something that this person is going to have to sacrifice consensually to bring this child into the world. That's different.
Yeah.
I think you know that. I think you're just being dishonest.
I'm saying it's different, but it's also totally subjective as to whether, someone would rather, endure the childbirth process or go through 18 years of taking care of like something and bearing that burden. So, I mean, that's just, I mean, whether or not it's different doesn't prove the argument wrong or right. Obviously it's different. I'm just saying that.
Answer, though. Like, you still haven't answered my
that?
original question. Should I be obligated to donate blood?
No, I already said no. You shouldn't be obligated to give up your liver.
Now you're creating a special set of circumstances for my uterus then, because to say it's just, well, it's there as though it's not being used. You are though. Okay, so why should I have to allow a fetus to use my uterus? Why is that different?
Why should you have to? The difference I was saying is that with giving blood or giving a piece of your liver or a kidney, you lose that. You don't lose your uterus when the baby's there. It's still there when the baby's gone. So that's not an analogous situation.
It is an analogous situation, especially the giving blood one, for example, right? So when I give blood, that is far less invasive and has far fewer impacts on my body overall in the long term than a pregnancy. I mean, this is like, tell me you've never had a pregnancy without telling me you've never had a pregnancy. I had to be induced, for example, because I have multiple sclerosis. I have multiple sclerosis, so I had to be induced when I was pregnant because I started losing the function of my legs because the pregnancy itself was exceptionally detrimental to my body. And I also had a mild form of dysplasia, which meant that my uterus wasn't lined up appropriately, which caused me to now have relatively constant pain during menstruation that I didn't have prior because of this pregnancy. So I have lifelong effects as a result of me having this pregnancy, which I wholeheartedly consented to and would do 10 out of 10 would do again because I love my son. So that's not the point of this argument. But the thing is, me giving blood has far less potential detrimental effects. Women can die during childbirth. So for you to drill it down to saying, well, you never get that kidney back, there's a million things about my body that, oh my God, I will never get back because of that pregnancy. So you are wrong.
Well, I wasn't arguing that pregnancy has no effects. I mean,
I still get to keep my uterus, right? So it's basically the same as giving blood, although it's not, because I can be forced to go through that, but I can't be forced to give blood. I am just so over the semantic arguments about women's bodies. All of us are forced to sit here constantly listening to people giving semantic, ridiculous and trivial arguments about how we should be forced to do something with our bodies. And when I am done with, I am done. You cannot force me to give blood. You cannot force me to give my uterus. That is the end, period, full stop. The end. There are dramatic differences. And for you to drill down my body and going through a pregnancy to being the same as giving blood because I get to keep my uterus, like that's insulting to me. I've given birth. I've been pregnant more than once, and I've lost a child that I wanted. So don't tell me what it's like to be pregnant.
Yep. I think that this conversation has ceased being productive. I think we probably can end this call here. But thanks so much for calling, Mike. Well, actually, no, I don't thank you for calling, but you did it. So that's a thing.
I appreciate him calling. I get it. And I try.
Yeah.
And I try, but it's very difficult because you get to the point that you're essentially saying, you're telling me, you're like looking me in the eyes and telling me that you get to tell me what to do with myself.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to sit here and like, just think about all of the intellectual reasons why you might be right, why I should actually have to do with my body what you tell me to do. Like that's what the outcome of that conversation is when somebody has it with somebody like me. That's the desired outcome for me to go, yeah, you know what? You're right. You have the right to tell me what to do with my body, not me. Yeah, you're right. I see your point. No, go fuck yourself. Anyway, So if you'd like to talk to us on Discord, we'll be there after.
Yeah. Time to wrap up the show. We were a little over time anyway. It was good. It was a good time to drop Mike. Also, I apologize in chat, but I want to say it live too. I was using very, very gendered language there. And I want to be clear that obviously not everyone who gives birth is a woman, but
of course
I think it's habitual language. It's ingrained. Working on it.
That's a good call it from the chat. I love that our audience takes note of those things because that's a worthy correction.
Yeah.
I will try to be more cognizant of that myself in the future. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, Arden, tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, I don't want to get the ACA in trouble, so I won't give you links, but I'll tell you what, follow me on Twitter. Okay. You'll get plenty of opportunities to know where to go. Yeah. And I'll be back.